wrestler, a lot of thoughts would think I looked like that, really tough, really strong. But really, I was this kind of wrestler right here. That's me as a sophomore in high school, and that's some headgear that we found lying in the wrestling room that kind of looked like a bra. So I was like, that looks funny, so I'll just put it on and post for a picture. But those are the people. That's Victoria and that's Travis. They're my friends in wrestling. But when I was a freshman, as every freshman wrestler goes through, is there's this initiation that happens to you. We call it a greasy, and what a greasy is basically you get pinned down and you get poked and tickled, but then the worst part of it is that you get all of these stubby, hairy chins just rubbed into your face and your neck. It feels really awkward and uncomfortable, and that's what happened to me. So my freshman year, this was towards the end of the wrestling season. We were at semi-state, and in our hotel room, there's about 11 of us, and out of nowhere, all 11 of these guys, they pinned me down. And I have guys holding me down. They start poking at me. They start tickling me, which I'm really, really ticklish, by the way. So it was torture for me. Please don't tickle me, guys. It's bad. I start kicking, punching. It's horrible. But then it's a week of just growing out your facial hair. So I had a bunch of dudes that came up to me and started rubbing their chins, like in my face, in my neck. And it was just the most awkward experience of my life. But it was a good experience. And I think my dad's actually, he's in the back with my stepmom, and then there's my mom right here. My dad, I think, encouraged those guys to go a little bit rougher on me with that too. So you guys can talk to him and blame him for that. But they ganged up on me, and that was basically my big experience for being ganged up on. Has anybody else here been, ganged up on before? What's your story?
Ganged up on?
Yeah.
My birthday during wrestling season.
Mm-hmm.
So they all, we were doing jumping jacks, and they all, just converged on me and held me down and started smacking my stomach until it turned pink. That's why it's pink bellies.
Oh, pink bellies. Yeah, I'd rather have pink bellies than a greasy, though. I'll be honest. Anybody else ever, been ganged up on before? Have a story? Okay, so we have two wrestlers that have also been ganged up on. So guys, with wrestling at Jeff High, you get initiated by pink bellies or greasies. It's common. So we've all been ganged up on. We've all been a victim of our friends ganging up on us for, fun and harmless ways. But there's also some times that we may have been ganged up for more malicious, more harmful ways. And there's actually a person in history I think of as a really good example for this. And pull his picture up on the screen here. Other picture. There we go. That is Desmond T. Doss. Now, Desmond Doss was born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1919. His father was a World War I veteran, and he was actually in his 20s at the time of when World War II started. And all of his friends were actually going off to war. They were enlisting. They were going off to the fight. But he had a different little agenda here. He was actually a conscientious objector. Now, it's a big word, but basically what that means is because of his religious beliefs, for his religious reasons, he could actually opt out of enlisting in the war. Now, his beliefs were actually that he was a Seventh-day Adventist, which is a denomination of Christianity. And basically what they do is they heavily follow the Ten Commandments. And the one that applied here was the sixth one, which was thou shalt not murder. And he took that to the point of not even touching a gun. So he had a dilemma here. He could either stay at home and watch his friends go off to war and fight, or he could join in the fight and go in without a gun. And he chose option number 2. So he decided to enlist in the Army. And in his boot camp, he was actually one of the top recruits, very physically fit, did a lot of things that made him the top of his class. But one thing that held him back was when they started to go to the firing range. He would refuse to touch a gun because of his religious beliefs. So he actually stood his ground, had a deep faith in God that he would protect him, and kept strong to his beliefs. Because he had a choice, either touch a gun, go into war with a gun, possibly get shot, or go into war without a gun, be a medic. And he chose option number 2. So when that happened, he had a big target on his back, not only from all of his men here in his platoon in the Army, but also from Uncle Sam and the U.S. government. So what he did, kept his faith. It actually almost got him kicked out of the Army. And it took him to almost being court-martialed. He was in court. His father pulled a few plugs, and he was actually able to fight in the war without a gun. And he served in the Pacific Theater. Now, the Pacific Theater of the war was actually more violent than the European theater because the Japanese would fight literally to the death. And one of these battle scenes was actually on the island of Okinawa. Okinawa is one of the deadliest, bloodiest, actually battles of the war, especially Hacksaw Ridge, which you guys probably have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge. That's what this movie is based off of, this guy right here. So what he did was actually pretty miraculous. He went into battle with no gun, under a heavy fire, rescued 75 men, one by one, and lowered them down to safety. And he did get shot once, but he still kept going back. And because of that, he won a Medal of Honor. First conscientious objector to actually win the Medal of Honor. And he did that all without firing a gun once. And that's him before he died. That was actually back in the early 2000s. And to think, that is a war-hardened veteran that did not shoot a gun once. But he looks pretty awesome, right? Got all of his medals, his Purple Heart, Medal of Honor around his neck. Proud patriot. And just to think, he could have picked up a gun, gone into the fight, maybe gotten shot or something else could have happened. But since he had his faith in God, he stood his ground and for his beliefs, and that's the Desmond Doss that we know today. And we have a good movie out of it too. So sometimes being bold about what you believe in can have some challenging consequences. And so during the last 2 weeks of this series, Hear Me Roar, we've actually been talking about being bold in your faith, how you can be bold by taking a stand for what you believe in and speaking up about it, and all the while not being ashamed of what you believe in. And that's some pretty hard stuff today, right? Being bold about your faith, standing for God, especially in your schools, because right now you guys are in a world that's ruled by social media. People are literally telling you what to do. So in this world, you have to be able to find a sense of who you are in a world that's trying to tell you who to be. So it's some pretty tough stuff. But that's why we're going to be talking about a little bit of boldness for you guys today. So far we talked about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or as me and my sister Andrew, who we grew up watching VeggieTales, Rad, Shack, and Benny. And today we're going back to Daniel, and we're actually talking about probably the most famous story in the book of Daniel. So if you guys weren't here with us for weeks 1 and 2 of the series, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a recap for that. So Daniel was a follower of God. He was an Israelite. And when he was alive, Babylon came in and actually decimated the whole nation, and they actually kidnapped everybody. They captured them, brought them back over to Babylon. And Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were actually all really young, attractive, smart men. So they were actually taken to be taught the ways of the Babylonians and to have higher places within the kingdom. And one thing that they had to do was they had to, of course, eat the food that was given to them. They refused to do that since they didn't want to have unclean food. So they stood their ground. They had faith in God, especially with Daniel, and he was actually delivered from that. Or if we go to another story with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they actually refused to worship a big giant golden idol. Huge golden idol that was King Nebuchadnezzar. And as we probably remember from that story, because they did not bow down and worship this idol, they actually ended up being thrown into a giant fiery furnace. A furnace so hot, burned the people that threw them in there. And miraculously, God delivered them out of that. So we see that God continues to deliver these guys, even though they were actually having their faith in God. They stood their ground, they had their faith in God, and God delivered them every single time. So going further on in the story, over the years, Babylon was actually handed down from Nebuchadnezzar's sons, and it got down to King Darius, which Darius was actually Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. So during that time, Daniel was actually getting a lot more influence in the kingdom. He was in a higher status. He was kind of like a governor of sorts, and because he kept on having his faith in God, he kept on doing really good things. If you actually go back, I'm not going to get into this today, but in the previous chapter, Daniel 5, you actually see how Daniel gets to that higher space, a higher place in the kingdom, and doing something for Darius' father. So as Daniel kept on gaining this status, the other guys that were actually Babylonians were getting a little jealous of him. I mean, to think of that. You have somebody that's an outsider coming into our place and getting a higher status than us that's, he's not even Babylonian. So as the result of that, the other men became jealous, and they wanted his position, and they wanted to take him down. So they actually really were starting to put a target on Daniel's back. And we're actually going to start seeing that as we get here into the book of Daniel. So we'll start in Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. So it pleased King Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, which are basically government officials, authorities, to be throughout the whole kingdom. And over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps would give accounts, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard for the kingdom. But they did not find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no other error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground or complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." And the high officials in the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, and all the counselors and the governors agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes a petition to any god or man for 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions. Sounds kind of familiar, right? Kind of like with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with the big giant golden idol they had to worship. So we'll continue on here. Actually, never mind. We're not going to continue. So Daniel didn't do anything wrong, right? It says in here, he actually did everything right. Because of his faith in God, he followed his rules, and God kept on delivering him and actually elevating him to a higher position. And because the other government officials were jealous of Daniel, they made this crazy law which would make it illegal for Daniel to worship God. And if Daniel decided to worship God, he would be thrown into a den of lions and be eaten up. So there was a decision that Daniel had to make here. All right, it was either worship God, still pray to him, still doing what he was doing, and have faith that God would do something, or abandon God, lose his faith, and worship the king. So we'll go ahead and continue on to see kind of what happens here. So when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and the Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." And the stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. So, how bold is that, right? I mean, you have this law that he knows he's going to be thrown in the den of lions for doing that, but what does he decide to do? What's the first thing? I'm going to go pray to God. I'm just going to do what I keep on doing. I'm not scared. And that's what he did. So he went there and he prayed, and because of that, he was thrown into the den of lions. So let's take a second here to put ourselves in a situation like this. Have you ever been thrown into the den, quote unquote den, of course, you're not going to be really thrown into a den of lions, but have you been in a place where you stood boldly for your faith or simply for what you believe in and had to suffer the consequences for it? That's pretty frightening, right? I know for myself, actually, when I was back in 2016, I went on a trip to the Dominican Republic. And because I decided to be bold about my faith, go share my faith in another country, be bold and actually be with those friends that I had on that trip that I was in college, I actually lost all my friends that I had from high school. I had all my friends that I've known, my best friend for 11 years at that point. But I was bold enough to stand for what I believe in and just move on from them and actually be with people that are going to build me up in my faith. Now, if you've never been in a situation like this, it's all right. But just to think, imagine what it would be like if you were in Daniel's shoes, having a target on your back for your faith, and then being attacked and put in danger. Pretty scary stuff, right? So the question that I would have for you then is, could you continue to follow God? Would you buckle under the pressure and succumb to what other people tell you? You only have 2 choices. Which one are you going to take? Would you take the hard road and stand firm in your faith? Or would you do whatever you need to say to get out of it? Will you have peace while you're in your pit, or while you're in this pit, or would you have despair? So while you think about that, we're going to continue on, and actually we'll see how this story actually ends. So then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then, at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm." And the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up and out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Actually, let's go back to that really quick, and I just want to take a note on that. So a couple things we actually see here. For one, Daniel is not mad at anybody. We had those people that did those things to him, put him in the den, tricked him, attacked him. He had the king that actually signed this order, but he did not blame them at all. He wasn't angry at them. He actually still blessed the king because of that. But the thing he did was praise God, because he knew who actually delivered him from that. All right, we'll go ahead and continue. My God sent his angel, shut the lions' mouths, because they had not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king, I've done no harm. Then the king exceedingly was glad and commanded that Daniel be taken out of the den. So that Daniel was taken out of the den, and no kind of harm was found in him, because he had trusted in his God. I know I read that again, but I like those. I like that a lot. All right, continue. So I know verse 24 is not up there, but it actually says that the king took the guys that made that law and put Daniel in the lion's den. He took them, he took their wives, he took their kids, basically their whole family, threw them into the lion's den, and they were lunch for the lions. So, as kind of gruesome that is, it's the Old Testament. That's the kind of stuff you get. But the thing is that you have to know from that is that you don't have to get revenge on people. You are not the avenger. God is for you. God will take care of those people that do the wrong things to you, in whatever way it may be. Your job is not to get revenge or get back at those people. Your job is just to thank God that he got you out of there. So, because of his faith, Daniel was spared from the lions, though there was no guarantee that this would happen. He had no idea whether God, would rescue him from the lion's den, but he still trusted in God. So, not knowing the outcome, he still trusted in the Lord. How is that even possible? That's crazy, right? So, this passage does tell us, the outcome of the story. But it doesn't give us a sense of what was going through Daniel's mind. It doesn't say whether he was scared or he was confident that God would do it. And my guess is that he was actually pretty afraid. I mean, you can have all the trust you can in the Lord, but at the same time, we're human. I mean, you can be afraid. But what I get from that is that it's okay to be afraid, but it's also important to trust God, because he will deliver you. So what do we get from this? The answer is taking a bold stand for God can have scary consequences, but Daniel's story tells us that even in the worst situations, God can still be trusted, and the outcome will always be for building you up, like what it says in James 1. So in James 1, if you guys don't know, it says that find joy in trials, because it actually makes you stronger. I know some of you guys have heard my analogy about a tree, and I won't get into too much detail of it, but basically, trees outside, they need to be beat up. They need strong winds, they need heavy rain, harsh sunlight, so they know where they need to dig their roots in, the ground. And where do we dig our roots in when we have those hard trials that come in our lives? In God. So if you look at a tree outside, trees look pretty beautiful, but if you look up close, they're going to be all mangled and twisted and scars and beat up. And some of you guys are probably already like that, scarred and beat up, maybe emotionally, physically. But if you've dug your roots deeper in God, the next time that happens, you're going to be standing strong, and it's not going to harm you at all, really. And you're still going to be beautiful in the end. So something we have to remind ourselves is that peace will follow despair when you follow God. So despite your fears, my notes are, so despite your fears, you can boldly live in the lion's den, knowing that God will still get you out of it. Either it might be immediate, or it might come in some time. But that's where it comes down to you guys. Trust in the Lord. He will get you out that. So just like Daniel, when things even are looking hopeless, you can choose peace in the pit. So where do we go from there? So if you want to grow in your boldness for God today, today's conversation is very important if you want to grow in your boldness for God. So as we start getting to the end today, I do want to give you, I don't want to give you like specific steps or anything like that, but I do want to spend a few moments to worship God in a way of, learning about him and getting into his word like we're doing now. But also we want to worship God that gave Daniel that peace in the pit, who continues to give us peace today. That's where Daniel started. So I think that's what we should do too. So when you guys are going home tonight after church today, spend some time in worship. In your car, worshiping God, praying in your car, just taking some time just to reflect and sit in that stillness that what God has actually done for you, because that's going to lead you to have more boldness, more trust, and things like that. So throughout Scripture, we actually have a lot of different names and meanings for God. And one of those names is Jehovah Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. So if you guys are looking for peace, I know that one song that we sing up here, peace, bring it all to peace. You know that song? Well, that peace that we sing about, we want, actually comes from the Lord. That's the only place where peace can actually come from. So United Pursuit. I love United Pursuit, one of my favorite worship bands. If you guys are looking at worshiping in your car or anything like that, pull up some United Pursuit. And one song that actually is really good for today is called Head to the Heart. And in one of their many bridges they have in their songs, since they are a big worship band, of course, they have 100 bridges in their songs. There's lyrics that says, "There's no shame in looking like a fool when I give you what I can't keep to take a hold of you." I'll say that again. There's no shame in looking like a fool when I give you what I can't keep to take a hold of you. That's kind of long, but at the core of it is like, there's no shame in giving up what you have in this world when you give it all to God to take a hold of him. So how does this apply to Daniel? Well, Daniel was bold. He's like, I have this high place in this kingdom where I'm not even native to, but I'm willing to give all of that up, willing to give up my life so I can just take a hold of you, God. That I can sit in my chamber, I can look towards the promised land, look towards my home, and I can pray to you. Now, he did 3 times a day, but we're called to pray continuously, of course. You guys can continue to pray. Now, there's also here in, actually, never mind. We'll go continue on. So, how do we do this? I'm going to challenge you guys, all right? First off, I'm going to challenge you guys to start trusting in God more. How do we do that? Well, start by praying. Pray to the Lord. God, I trust you. And believe it. Believe it in your heart. Now, if you don't really trust God, or if you have a little bit of trust and you don't really know how to trust God, or you want to trust God more, just pray. Just, God, I don't know how to trust you. I don't have a lot of trust in you. Can I have more? I want to trust you more. So it really takes it from the heart. Be outpoured to God. Say, hey, God, I trust you. Or I don't trust you. I need more of it. And really, when you have that trust that's built up, then you can go ahead and be bold. Be bold for whatever it may be. So after you pray for the trust, pray that he will actually grow your boldness for him as he grows for your trust in him. So there's countless examples in the Bible that you can actually see where you can get this boldness. One famous psalm that you can see, there's throughout all the entire Psalms that you can see this trust that's built up. But one that's really famous is Psalm 23, of course. For you lead me through the valley of shadow of death, I fear no evil, all that kind of stuff. Read that psalm, read it all the way through, look at it deeply, see how the trust is actually built up in the Lord, especially in things that happen. I mean, Daniel was led through the valley of the shadow of death, but he feared no evil because he had God. I mean, he might have feared, but he didn't ultimately fear that. So, also Proverbs 3:5. Never read Proverbs 3:5. Basically, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So, when it comes down to it, are we really smart about this kind of stuff to really know everything? No. So don't lean on our own understanding of things. Lean on the Lord. I don't understand why people are against me for my faith. I don't understand why people are attacking me for my love of Jesus. I have my Bible out in class. Why are people picking on me for it? Like, don't get mad at those people. Don't lean on your own understanding. Just know that God's in this for you guys. I mean, if I really want to give you guys some advice on like why people may not like Jesus or they want to kind of pick at you for your faith, it's because they don't understand. People will fight against things that they don't understand. That's why it's your all's job to be bold and share your faith. Now, sharing your faith may be hard. How do I do it? Just share your testimony, share your story. Share what you guys have done or what your understanding is of the Lord. What has God done for you? I guess an example for me, my freshman year of college was the worst year of my life. Suffering from depression. My parents got divorced. My sister and I barely talked to each other. I was caught in between everything. I wasn't able to outpour my own emotions. But and that led down a slippery slope of me almost committing suicide. But God delivered me in that. And through that, I was actually able, after that summer, because I was like July that I almost committed suicide, and after that summer in the fall, I actually became a youth leader here at Eastside. And that's 5.5 years ago. And I'm still doing this today, and look where I'm at now. So God can really deliver you guys through that. And speaking of, sharing your faith with people, I just want to mention our little 30 for 30 challenge. If you guys don't know about this, it's all right. We have these little Hear Me Roar cards outside, I think, on the little Welcome Center booth. Basically, it is, for the next 30 days, 3 people. That's all it is, 3 people. Pick those people, pray for them, share your faith with them, as in your testimony, or share your story, and bring them to church. Don't be scared, oh, will they like it, will they not? Just trust in the Lord. He will help you guys in that. And also something you have to remind yourself too. You are not the gardener. Just plant the seeds, let God grow them for you, okay? So, being bold is not always easy. We all know this. So, this week, I hope you hopefully remember to fill up on God first, get in His Word, read His Word. Fill up on that first. Then surround yourself with people that you can be bold together. So, go and share your faith together. You guys all have lunch at school, or for my adults, you have lunch at work. But for my students here, for you guys, if you have lunches together, just the 2 of you or 3 of you, whatever, go sit at some random person's table. Doesn't matter the color of their skin, the kind of person they are, doesn't matter whatever. Just pick a table, go there, sit down, and be like, hey, can we tell you guys a story? And you guys can see a lot of change come through that. So the God of peace can be trusted. So be bold. He's with you guys. Just like Desmond Doss was. Going back to his story. He was bold. He stood strong in his faith. And because of that, he saved the lives of 75 men, and he won a Medal of Honor. And just imagine you guys can do even more than that. Go ahead and pray. Father God, I just thank you so much for this opportunity for me to come up here and preach. It's my first sermon. I just pray, more opportunities to do this in the future. But God, I just want to pray for these students in front of me right now, that they can be so bold in their faith that they just ooze Jesus around. People just know them as a Christian, but they can be bold together. And knowing that through their boldness and sharing their faith, there's probably going to be consequences. They might be thrown into a lion's den, or maybe even worse, or they might just have something as minor as losing friends. But God, to know that you are God. You're always good. You've always been good. You always will be good. You can be trusted. So God, I just pray these students can just trust in you. I just pray through that trust that they can be bold, and that boldness can just bring plenty of people in here. I know we're just calling for 3 people, God, per person, but I pray that it can be more. I pray for a miracle, because anything can be done through you, God. So God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for what He did for us on the cross, to be able to have us, to be able to be bold, to be able to go out and share our faith. And also just thank you for putting us in a place, in a country, that we can actually be bold for our faith and not be worried about losing our lives for it. So God, I love you so much. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.